Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dr. Paulina. I'm a fourth year MED-PEDs resident, and currently I'm going through the interview process for fellowship. So today I'm going to be covering 6 tips and tricks that you should consider if you really want to make a strong first impression on a program. All right, so start with tip number 1 is setting your interview space. What I mean by that is all of this. I have some nice lighting to kind of bring out some of the decor pieces that I've used in this space. And then I also have a backlight that kind of helps with the overall aura while I'm sitting here. And it really illuminates my overall shape. I think it helps to bring out my screen while I'm on Zoom, and overall makes me look a little bit more glowy and a little bit more radiant. And as you can see, I've decorated it with a few personal touches. So I really love plants and just little things like this and little pieces of artwork. I get a lot of questions during my interviews about my shelves and like different decor things. And it's funny because those are the things that you wouldn't think that you'd be asked in an interview. But again, this is like kind of a hidden way of showing your personality. So take advantage of that and set the stage so that your space demonstrates something about you. Tip number 2, don't be late. It's so important. I cannot stress to you how important it is that you are on time for your interview. So last year, it was the first time, I think that was very reasonable that a lot of people got this wrong because they were on one time zone and their interview time was in a different time zone. However, this is the second year. We've had more time to prepare, so I feel like the stakes are definitely higher, and it shows that professionalism that you actually prepared, you went through your interview schedule, and that you double, triple check the times. Not only is this important in your interview, but it's important in real life because your schedule is always going to be changing through residency or fellowship. So making sure that you are on time at the right place at the right time is super important. So don't be late. Tip number 3 is do basic research. So what I mean by this is review the program, review who are the key players in the program, who is the program director, and you also want to check to see what kind of things that this program has to offer that maybe you haven't noticed in other programs, whether that be specific community outreach programs, if you're going into primary care, or if there's special simulation projects that a certain department has, or if there's any interesting work that they're doing globally, anything like that. You want to bring that up in your interview so that it shows that you actually did your research and you read the website. A lot of these institutions are spending more and more time on these websites and designing them so that you get a true sense for the people who work there and what the culture is. Also, if you have your schedule ahead of time, you want to review who are the people that you're going to be interviewing with. So for example, if you're interviewing with a program director, you want to ask them specific questions about the program itself. Don't waste your interview time asking questions about the call schedule because the program director is usually not really involved in that. It's usually the people who are coordinating the program. So for the program director, you want to ask them more about how is the program changing? Is there any big things coming up? Or things like what kind of leader do you like to be for your residents or fellows? Because it tells you a lot about the person who's going to be leading you into your graduation date. So again, if you're going to be meeting with multiple people, make sure you're reading about each one of them, who they are, what they do, and have questions prepared for them specifically, so it shows that you really are in tune with everyone in your interview day as if you were there just in person. Tip number 4 is know your resume. So what I mean by this is I want you to sit down with your application and go through each item that's listed on your application. So usually it starts with the history of all of your education. So it's usually college and then where you went to medical school, and if you got advanced degree like a master's or something like that. You want to be able to talk about all of those different experiences, especially if there was like a gap in your education, or if you had a job that you took and maybe had a gap year or anything like that. It's important to have those explanations of like what connects all of these different dots. And then another thing that I think is important is that everything in your resume or your application should point to something that is specific about you and you want to categorize for your interviewers, so that it shows that you're going to be using those skills that you learned from that experience into your next position, whether it's going to be residency or fellowship. And then also make sure that you go back even to your oldest work and you don't forget about that stuff if you're going to be listing it. So for example, for me, one of the things that I got asked during my interview was about my very first poster presentation that I did. So that was almost 2 years ago now, and I did remember the project that I did, but some of the details were just a little bit hazy. Thankfully, I was able to kind of pull it together just in time, and I was able to explain why that project was important to me. So it's important to review all of those different publications and presentations that you're including into your resume so that you can tell them in detail what you learned about that particular experience. And then also know your resume, but also know what's not on your resume. Because one of the interesting questions I got asked during one of my interviews is, I see that you're very well accomplished, but what is not on your resume that you think is important for people to know? So kind of a trick question, reverse psychology kind of thing, but I think it's important to kind of put all of that in a context, into a nice little package, so every little piece substantiates the whole picture. Tip number 5 is rehearse your story. So one of the most commonly asked questions during interviews is, tell me about yourself. And really, what the best way to think about this question is about kind of telling a story that would be something like opening a book and looking at the index of a book that has multiple chapters and being able to put those different chapters into a paragraph, essentially, because it gives your interviewer a chance to pick a certain chapter out of everything that you just said and ask you more about that and find out more about that specific experience that you had. So that was one of the great tips and tricks that I learned during this interview season, is to kind of give that index kind of answer. But also remember that your interviewer wants to know, why are you there at this moment in time? Why are you interviewing with that program? What has brought you to this moment? So you want to start off with, I personally like to start off with, I'm from the Chicago area, because that usually brings up some sort of commonality between people, like, oh, I'm from the Midwest too, or oh, I visited Chicago last summer, it was beautiful. So it's just like bringing those little tiny things into the story are really helpful. So you start off with where you're from, what was your initial interest in medicine and how you got into medical school, what are some of the important experiences that you had in medical school and choosing to go into your particular program, and anything else in your life that has those events that have led to you interviewing at this program ultimately. So again, you want to index your answer, but you want to make it flow so it's a nice little story. And I think that this question cannot be overemphasized. I think a lot of people, sometimes they don't necessarily will read your entire application, so it's nice to have that answer already prepared and give them a whole broad view of who you are and why you're here. So make sure that you rehearse your story, because we can tell as the interviewers that maybe you didn't practice. You don't really know why you're here or why you're interviewing with this program specifically. So you want to resonate with the people that you're interviewing with. So if your program has a specific emphasis, you say, I'm interested in this institution because I want to do what you are doing here, this particular program or this particular project or this way of practice. It's super important, because if you can't reach that commonality and the fact that you have the same purpose, you're not going to make a great impression. So I hope you learned a little bit from those tips. Tip number 6, you always want to have questions. You never want the conversation to go stale. And questions are a great way to keep that conversation going. So, usually the interview will be like, you introduce yourself, the interviewer introduces themselves, they tell you a little bit about themselves, and then there's a few questions that the interviewer has for you specifically, and then it's like, okay, what questions do you have? So you want to be really intentional about the questions you're asking, because interviewers get asked the same questions over and over and over again throughout the entire interview season. So you want to ask questions that are insightful and show that you're really thinking about that program specifically, and that your interest is genuine, and that you're not just asking the same questions everybody's asking. So some of the things that I really like to ask, again, are kind of specific to the person that I'm talking to, but things that will help you to figure out whether that program is good for you or not is definitively defining what the culture is in that institution. If the culture is that we're strong in academics and all we care about is research, maybe that won't be a good fit for you, because you really love patient care and you love being in the clinic. So research won't be for you. But other programs will say, we really nurture the patient and doctor relationship. We have special programs where we advocate for our patients, that kind of thing. Then it gives you a different sense of the culture. So again, you want to ask specific questions where you're going to elicit those answers that are going to tell you more things that are intimate about the program. And again, like I said, you always want to have questions prepared, because you don't want the conversation to lag at the end and have this weird lull where you're just waiting for the timer to run out and then it's awkward. So definitely be prepared with questions. And if you run out of questions to say, always, you can never go wrong, is ask the interviewer more questions about themselves, because people love talking about themselves. I mean, it's true, come on. Doctors are a little bit self-centered sometimes, but this also gives you another opportunity to find commonalities with your interviewer, and again, build that sort of sense of belonging. I hope that makes sense to you, but let me know down in the comments below, what kind of questions are you guys asking on your interviews, and what kind of questions you think are important to ask. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed these tips and tricks. I really hope that you guys have a successful interview season. I know it's hard. Hang in there. You're gonna get through it. If you just follow these steps, it'll become like second nature, and it'll make the interviewing process a little bit more enjoyable, even if you're just staying at home. So again, if you have any questions or things that you want me to talk about in terms of medical education, or topics that you really want to know about how to be successful during training, let me know and I'll try to come up with a video for you guys. So make sure you like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And again, it's been fun hanging out with you guys. I wish you all the best this season. Bye, guys.